Imagine that you have two tanks. One is a material tank and one is what I call a fulfillment tank. Suppose that your material tank, meaning your stuff and your ability to buy stuff, is 60 or even 70% full, while your fulfillment tank, meaning the level to which you respond to your deepest needs and desires, is empty. Question: doesn't it in this case make sense to stop filling up that material tank and switch over to filling up that fulfillment tank? In other words, switching over to fulfilling work. And this is exactly what I did in my mid-20s. I had been in the rat race for several years, and as my income rose, I fell prey to lifestyle inflation. I started eating out 5 times a week instead of previously 2 or 3. I lived all by myself in an $1,800 2-bedroom apartment in Singapore at that time, which in hindsight was such a waste of money. I wanted out of there, but here was a fact that was hard to accept. Simplifying my lifestyle and spending less would give me the chance to break free and find rewarding work. That was the solution. So I got to work and I came up with an exit plan. I started accumulating a CFF, or a Career Freedom Fund. Watch this video up here if you want to know more about that, of about $50,000. And that was my capital that I would use to invest in my new life. I knew that if I wanted to pursue my dreams of acting, filmmaking, and entrepreneurship, I needed to prepare a financial buffer. Pursuing my dreams, there would definitely be times with little or even no income, and to change careers, I needed to invest money into learning, classes, and courses. Once I left my job, I would experience a huge cash flow deficit. So to counter that, while I was still in the rat race, I needed to accumulate a huge surplus. And I know $50,000 is really not that much, but it was just the right amount for what I was about to do. To accumulate that $50,000, I needed to seriously downsize, and that didn't mean just cutting out a few lattes or so. That meant that I needed to reduce my largest expense, which obviously was my rent. By taking in a roommate into my apartment, a guy who was my friend's fiancé, who was assigned to work in Singapore while she was still staying in Indonesia, I managed to shave off $800 of my rent, leaving me just $800 to pay and $800 to save. I also needed to drastically reduce my shopping sprees. No, luckily I never really did shopping sprees, but every weekend I did buy something at the mall, so I had to put on the brakes with that. I decided that I didn't need to buy a new car like many of my colleagues did. I also didn't need to buy branded handbags and join my other colleagues who paraded in new Chanel, Louis Vuitton, or Miu Miu every other month. And because I didn't want to keep working in a job that I didn't like to buy things that I didn't really need, it also followed that I no longer needed to chase my next promotion, which would give me a salary increase of 10% or something like that. This was what I realized at that moment. I was at a point where my material tank was healthy, I'd say, but my fulfillment tank was close to zero, and that just made me miserable. I knew that to save myself, I needed to turn my attention to that fulfillment tank. I needed to realize that I had enough stuff. Or in other words, that I had achieved my MTH at that point. MTH stands for Money Threshold of Happiness. You might have heard of a famous study done by Daniel Kahneman and Angus Deaton titled High Income Improves Evaluation of Life but Not Emotional Well-Being, in which they found that emotional well-being continues to rise with a higher income, but that beyond an amount of $75,000 per year, there is no further progress. So I spun off this concept to become more personal. I said that, okay, for most people, this number seems to be $75,000, but what is it for me specifically? What is my personal money threshold of happiness, or income beyond which I do not derive significantly more happiness? At that time, with a total compensation of nearly $100,000, I thought that I had enough. Earning $110,000 and being able to afford more stuff wouldn't really make me much happier. And that way of thinking helped me to finally quit my job and change my career. So back to why most people will never leave the rat race. First, they are stuck in false survival mode where they believe that they are lacking a million of material things, so they keep on circling through the maze, whereas what they're actually lacking is meaning. Second, they don't realize that they are pretty close or have even surpassed their MTH, or money threshold of happiness. At 28, 35, or 40, they are earning more money now than they did in their early 20s. But they fail to realize that earning more money in an unfulfilling job is a lost cause, as it doesn't make them happier but more miserable by the day. They hang on to possessions and take on more debt. They don't see that while their material tank is filling up with stuff, a huge gap is looming in terms of work fulfillment. No wonder that many people feel like there is no meaning in life. We are prioritizing the wrong things.